Hello, how are you? I'm well, thank God. Pleasure to be here. How long do we usually go? Excellent. And do you mind if in the introduction I talk about a little bit about my live streaming project that I've been doing for the last 4 years? Okay, excellent. And one last thing, if you don't mind, when I do talk about that, I would just like to show people my YouTube. And so the way that I would anticipate doing that is just changing my screen over and showing people all of my simultaneous live streams that they can be able to see from all of the different angles. Would that work for you? Excellent. Um, so we're going to do the first part on Time of Dead, and then the second part on the Nephilim and perhaps some Ezekiel, perhaps some Enoch. Is that correct? All right, sounds like a plan. Oh, is this live, by the way? Excellent. All right, I'm ready when you are. I'm well, thank God. How are you? Most, cer- Most certainly. I was a skeptic, certainly at age 14, and really up until my early 20s. As someone who believes that which I would see in the media and understands that anything alien or UFO related is generally going to be considered as people would say science fiction or certainly fiction in general. It was my belief, and I even debated people on this subject publicly, that aliens, if they existed, we would know about it. It would be a public event, and I basically did not dig very deeply into it. It was in the year 2008, approximately, when the internet and internet speeds generally transitioned from the early 90s in text-based and then image-based into video-based, and many different opportunities were available, especially in the documentary realm, for someone who was once a skeptic to dig into this topic more and more. And it was in my viewing of Dr. Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project in 2008 that I really, for the first time, saw many different whistleblowers from all different backgrounds, military intelligence, people work for the FAA, and even in the international community, talk about aliens and ufology and just humanity not being alone for the first time with such seriousness and such evidence, and it opened my eyes. The Disclosure Project took place in 2001, specifically May 9th, 2001, at the National Press Corps in Washington, D.C. And so it was a few years afterward that I would eventually see the Disclosure Project, and it changed my life, absolutely, and made me recognize that while we may not be alone, it forced me to delve into different topics such as about bizarre alien abduction phenomenon, Philip Corso, ancient aliens, and to recognize that humanity exists on Earth, but we may not. We may have been perhaps guided here. Um, our evolution may have been influenced, and this was certainly an awakening journey. At age 14, though, I was not aware of any of this even. It was still in its infancy. I was more worried about school books and friends than taking on such a massive, massive topic such as ufology. But it would be in coming years that I would essentially wake up to this event, that we aren't alone, and take it with immense seriousness. And I would also say, I'd like to say, if I may, my last name is Rothschild, and yes, all the Rothschilds generally are related around the world, but I have no direct, or I should say, any type of uh, direct connection that we have is certainly distant. We all do have certainly some common ancestors, but yes, I'm a regular person, probably like most of your listeners who didn't have any inside information in terms of the ufology subject. It was something that had to come about independently. Well, generally, I see them as being separate. When we get into the feeling, the angels, even Ezekiel's visions, Gnosticism, Kabbalah, these are different topics. Nephilim generally are referenced as mysterious beings mentioned specifically in Bereshit or Genesis 6, 1 through 4, often interpreted as giants or offspring of heavenly beings and humans. A traditional source of this is biblical text and later Jewish writings. Then we have angels, malachim, divine messengers, or spiritual beings who serve God's purposes. Again, Hebrew Bible, Rabbinical Judaism, and Kabbalah are our main sources for this. Ezekiel's beings, Achayot, Ophanim, these celestial creatures that we see in Ezekiel's vision of the divine throne, these also come from the Hebrew Bible, specifically the book of Ezekiel. But then when we get into Gnostic beings, this is a later movement. These are complex spiritual entities in various Gnostic systems, often involving cosmic rulers, emanations, and a distinction between the supreme God and creator. And we see this in later movements into the Common Era, generally the second to fourth century. And Kabbalistic beings generally come about much later. They're more medieval Jewish mysticism. So we're looking at 1,000 years later. And these are generally spiritual forces, some angels, emanations, and levels of reality within the Jewish mystical cosmology. So generally, we see them as separate, at least I see them as separate. And I would also say that there are different interpretations of what these beings are, but from my standpoint, my research and certainly my life, they're separate. Well, I'm skeptical of everything. I think it's always important to always ask questions and to never take anything as truth. But I feel that Simon said is what he believes to be true, that we aren't alone, that there are real Mars bases. He references in his book and in his interviews that uh, basically when we go to Mars, perhaps we need to go with not just the geological or perhaps physical type of mentality, but also an archaeological philosophy, and to go there to perhaps see if there are ancient structures there, which generally isn't discussed. Um, his background is such that uh, he is really, from an American equivalent, someone almost like a Joint Chiefs of Staff member. He is, at one point, was one of the 24 highest members of the Israeli Defense Force. His background is extremely vetted, and there is some interest in if he's willing to make these claims and willing to say that the Trump administration is aware of them, that consciousness does not end when, but certainly. Absolutely. Most certainly. Well, before we go there, which is certainly the main claim that he makes, he first states that extraterrestrial civilizations exist. And from any member of the military or any member of the government to be able to make this claim certainly gets attention. He states that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations exist, that these civilizations have been observing humanity for a great period of time, and that humanity has not fully understood its relationship with them. And so once we establish that he does say that these are advanced beings, and he gets into the Galactic Federation. This is really the most certainly his book is really an autobiography, and the key aspects of this are written in the epilogue. In the epilogue, there is reference in his in idea of the Galactic Federation that there are potentially 9 different species. He does not go into anything in terms of their biology, whether they're the Greys, whether they're the Nordics, whether they're reptilians, nothing like that, which I think many people wish that he would if he had this knowledge. But from seeing his reviews and reading his books in translations and his reading his interviews in newspapers, I think he would have said it if he would. He doesn't seem to be someone who's holding back on very much information. So to give listenership an idea, we're looking at potentially, as he references, approximately 9 different species, but we don't have specifics as to their biology. It, that's it. That's absolutely correct. Yeah, in the Jerusalem Post. No, it was not. He doesn't give specifics. I don't know if he knows the specifics. doesn't even give a source of how he seems to have worked and his experience within the Israeli state. What he does say is that advanced extraterrestrial civilizations have organized into a cooperative structure. He describes this as a type of federation involving multiple civilizations, and he claimed that humanity had allegedly been interacting with this group. He also claims that there is some alleged cooperation with the United States and Israel, that the United States government has knowledge of these alleged contacts, that Israel was also involved and in this relationship, and that the interactions involved attempts to understand deeper questions about the universe. Uh, there are also claims that he makes that other countries are involved, including Russia, China, United Kingdom, and Japan, perhaps others as well, in addition to the United States. So it is not solely a United States-Israeli um, relationship. It perhaps may have to do with the more advanced countries of the world. And really, one of the things that he routinely states that the Galactic Federation said is that humanity is not ready yet. This became the famous headline that the aliens have asked not to announce that they are here. Humanity is not ready yet. Uh, the, the the argument that he makes is because of the possible effects that would happen with disclosure and its enormous consequences. Well, his lack of evidence is certainly a concern. And with immense and major claims that he makes require evidence. And so the lack of evidence is off-putting, certainly. However, this is someone who has basically said in their own words, I have nothing to lose. When he made these claims, he was 87 years old and had already won the highest awards in the Israeli government multiple times. As you had said, he's essentially the grandfather of the Israeli space program, the grandfather of the Israeli satellite program. And he didn't need the money necessarily. He was already a professor. He was already a contractor, already a lecturer. This seemed to be his opportunity to share what he potentially knew. And I think that's a really interesting uh, take that he wasn't necessarily doing this to make a lot of money, it seemed. There are skeptics that say, hey, he was promoting a book and he's trying to promote book sales. To give the listenership of a timeline when this occurred, the book was published in November of 2020, and then the major newspaper article was published in December of 2020, and then subsequent uh, English translations, specifically in the Jerusalem Post summaries, later in the month of December. And then he goes quiet, which, in my opinion, is quite interesting. He did not go on the podcast circuit. He did not go on the talk show circuit. He was not pushing this book as many other people have in the past, which to me lends some amount of credibility that he was not just doing it for financial gain. In terms of his mental state, he seemed to be in good conscience and not doing this for various reasons. He seemed to have his wits about him, even in the years after he has his wits about him. So it did not seem to be was having some kind of psychological issue. He seems to have been in good mental health when he made these claims and wanted to share what he allegedly knew with the world. And from my perspective, there's some credibility to that. Excellent question. Well, for the Donald Trump aspect of it, oh, go ahead. Most certainly. Well, from the Donald Trump aspect of it, you're absolutely right. I should claim that Donald Trump was aware of the alleged extraterrestrial situation, that he considered revealing the information, and that the alleged extraterrestrial group supposedly discouraged the disclosure because humanity was not ready. Now, a question that I have, and this is really for the White House press corps and just the media in general, if such a claim is being made, why not push this issue president? Did this occur? Is there something that you're not sharing with us? The topic of aliens, while so important, is not really discussed at the higher levels of the media as mainstream as even these claims are made. So I was quite disappointed in that. In terms of where is disclosure, from where is it going? I think there's an argument to be made that we are in a period of soft disclosure. that we have been for decades. That the media, many of the movies, the films, documentaries, books, and other resources that are published are to prepare humanity for the understanding that we are not alone and what kind of potential public shock that could occur if it happens too quickly, perhaps social disruption, religious questions arise, political consequences, and just the difficulty in your average individual of understanding that there are civilizations far more advanced than human has a lot of baggage. In terms of the idea of soft disclosure, there are maybe potential arguments in here that we may never get the answer that we want, and that this will just be information that is kept quiet to a certain element of society. There's that argument. There's another argument that states will continue to have soft disclosure until there's an event. And perhaps this is an event of aggression that one day there is a leader who is willing to talk about these subjects from a potential historical and in the modern age, a realistic standpoint that we need to handle this topic of maturity. And alongside some other of the philosophies, there's always the event that we may have some hard disclosure. A project will be type of event where all of a sudden all of the television and all of your 24-hour media outlets and social media, there is just a switch that is flipped essentially that says it's now time that we prepare the world for the next epoch of really disclosure. And with this, there could be religious connotations to it. There could perhaps be a global government aim for this that has been hypothesized. So, from my perspective, I don't know when disclosure is coming. I just can say that, at least from polling, it seems to be, at least from an American standpoint, more than 50% of people believe that we're not alone. So, whatever soft disclosure is being conducted, it does seem to be successful because people are no longer willing to believe that it is bunk or that it is really not actually true. Now, it gets into, we get into specifics whether we believe aliens are here on Earth, whether the abduction phenomenon is real, and things like that. But from the rest of it, the average person on the street, there is a more likely chance than not that we believe that we are not alone. And that is not always true in history. Well, he discusses an alleged underground base in Mars Pacific. So this is subsurface. Claims that this base involved cooperation between humans and extraterrestrial beings, specifically the United States government. He associates this base with American astronauts and representatives of the alleged extraterrestrial civilization. He states that within this Mars discussion and connected themes within the book that it involves perhaps humanity's future expansion in space and its role. There's a possibility of archaeology beyond Earth, and as I mentioned earlier, that's why he states that there are some evolving scientific realms that aren't really explored, like off-world archaeology, perhaps, or xenobiology, biology of perhaps species that are not Earth-based that he references. and really just the search for evidence of ancient civilization. In terms of what I would have loved to hear, perhaps about the alien base, so or the alleged alien base on Mars, is more about its physical structure, how long has it been there, how do people get there. We don't get any of this information, which is unfortunate, but is somewhat part of the course within ufology. We get a little bit, and it leads us to want more. And I would say that the claims of that he makes about Mars specifically are difficult for many people to swallow. There are some people who say, "Hey, I'm willing to go forward with Heinrich's claims about the Galactic Federation, perhaps consciousness existing after death." But this idea of Mars seems to perhaps go against some of the modern physics that we have. He doesn't go into how you get there, what's the length of time, who's been there, what happens with these people once they go there. He leaves the people who have read his book and read his interviews wanting more, and we still don't have an answer as to what exactly is going on. But in terms of what you said, this is consistent with many people who have made these claims previously. That they do exist, perhaps on other planets or planetoids, and that perhaps there's some kind of secret space agency that may exist, or secret space program, and this would seemingly be a part of that. Well, it seems as if we are, no matter how great we think of humanity, we are not mature enough. We are not type 1 civilization on the Kardashev scale, certainly not even close to type 2 or type 3, which is what these advanced civilizations may be. They're basically an infant, and that perhaps some type of extraterrestrial intelligence is helping us to evolve, perhaps guided evolution, to be able to sit at that top table of a type 1 civilization. It's almost as if when you're a child and you're not yet ready to sit at the adult table, for lack of a better analogy, that you're taught the different behavior that you should have and the maturity that is expected of you before you're given that opportunity. And perhaps some of these developments could be our association with nuclear weapons, or our association with global war, or our association with artificial intelligence. These might be tests to see how humanity is treating them. And in terms of, if we look at what perhaps other philosophers, other astronomers have stated, humanity is not even approaching that type 1 civilization yet. Within the next century or so, we may be looking at another millennia or two, to perhaps be at that type 1 where we basically are utilizing all of the energy within our own planet. But that doesn't mean that we're not moving toward that. And this guided evolution of an extraterrestrial intelligence may be helping to push us there. Generally, I think that's what Heinrich means when he makes the statement that humanity is not ready yet. And he doesn't give a timeline when he says we will be ready, and he doesn't give any kind of standard, like once there's global peace or once we're able to manage our energy levels, or once we're able to control climate, or any other type of verification is not given. It's just we are not ready yet. And the media ran with this statement, and certainly it's one of the more memorable statements of what Heinrich made in 20. It seems as if it is. So there is a Galactic Federation and perhaps some kind of shadowy clandestine group like Majestic 12, or some type of group of humans that make the decision, perhaps within intelligence agencies, as to what is disclosed. And then that information is then given to, I should say, to government officials and the media and such. So it may be a three-tiered system. There's a galactic federation. Somehow there's some kind of communication with some type of intelligence entity that is not disclosed, that is clandestine, that does keep this information classified, and then slowly the information is leaked into the government and the organization. It depends on how humanity thinks that we would handle it, and how the media thinks we could handle it. If there was major fear that was induced from the media, then people are going to be scared of it. But if it was handled in a calm and mature tone, perhaps people might be able to uh, to handle it with the maturity that it requires. I have taken this. It's not a perfect analogy by any means, but at least within the state of California, when people would say, "What would happen one day if they ever made marijuana legal?" When I was a kid, people would say, "Oh, there's going to be chaos in the streets, and people will overturn cars, and the government will immediately be overtaken." And that didn't happen at all, as we saw in the late 2010s. That once the decriminalization or eventual legality of marijuana happened statewide, it was just another day, basically. And the same could be true within the state of disclosure. Now, disclosure, albeit much different than the legalization of such a plant, but nevertheless, it is a possibility that humanity could handle the situation with maturity. What would be unable to do or reverse once disclosure occurs is the idea of, have we been reverse engineering different types of technology? Are some of the inventions that humans have given credit, are those perhaps reverse engineered technology? What happens in terms of who gets this type of technology? I see artificial intelligence as a tool, and it is a tool that certainly is accelerating in the development of autonomy and robotics. It may be a tool that we've been able to um, receive or develop from reverse engineered technology, and it itself can be reverse engineered alien technology. It would almost as if, let's say, we were seated here with some type of guided panspermia, and alien extraterrestrial intelligence thought, you know what, humanity isn't developing fast enough. give them let's fast forward their development a little bit, and so we'll make sure that the right inventions are found or the right organizations are created in order to advance civilization much faster than we once would, much more accurately than we once would, and from an a higher efficiency standpoint, continued improvements. If this was something that aliens wanted due to um, their own desire for humanity to be a more advanced civilization, I could see that happen. I also could see it as just a, basically a necessary development that you would get within computing. So, given enough time, if you give any civilization enough time with a computer, eventually they're going to develop artificial narrow intelligence, then artificial general intelligence, and then eventually artificial superintelligence. This might be an inevitability. So, in terms of could AI be an alien influence technology? I think it could be in itself, but also I am at least open-minded to the idea of Philip Corso and the idea that microelectronics, the transistor, and many of the other technologies that we have today may be alien influenced and perhaps reverse engineered, and thus the development that we have with AI today is necessarily also an alien influence development. So it could go both ways. We could have just the inevitable development from computing or aliens actually pushing this with different developments that we see. Within Judaism, generally, because we don't have one central spokesperson, the idea of humanity not being alone in the universe is a possibility. So there's no direct contradiction. For thousands of years, human beings have looked to the night sky and wondered whether Earth is unique or whether life exists elsewhere. And we have seen with the development of modern astronomy, the chances are that we may not be alone. And even rabbinical Cossacks of the previous century have anticipated perhaps some type of alien disclosure occurring, and that this doesn't necessarily contradict with what we certainly know about our known universe. So just basically be an addition, or we have to adapt perhaps to this type of disclosure. But there isn't something within mainstream centrist orthodoxy that says humans are alone and they can only be alone, and any other type of thought or anything outside of that directly contradicts what our central halacha or Jewish law is. And especially in the more modern age and modern thinkers and modern Orthodox camp generally, we are much more open-minded about this. We see disclosures perhaps being inevitable. And what happens then with with if we have disclosure? How does that affect us as religious people? Will we absolutely, yes. Generally, the covenant is seen between God and mankind. So any other extraterrestrial entity is generally not a part of that covenant. That doesn't mean that there may not be some type of agreement outside of what humanity knows. In terms of um, the theological possibility, there is no universal prohibition against alien life. There is an essential doctrine requiring for it to be the only inhabited world. And if there is a possibility or a worldview that the universe contains many forms of creation, there is an opportunity that perhaps they are outside of what we know within the Hebrew Bible. There have been, certainly throughout ancient and medieval Jewish thought, and philosophers who really explored questions about multiple worlds or celestial realms and the nature of existence. Into the modern age, most contemporary Jewish thinkers approach extraterrestrial life as a scientific question, a philosophical question, and a theological opportunity. Now, what would happen from a realistic standpoint if, let's just say, on television tomorrow, it was just announced that we're not from a religious standpoint, at least within Judaism, we would look toward our religious leaders and our rabbis. And we would ask the rabbis, how is this interpreted? And generally, uh, from my discussions with my rabbinic colleagues, we would continue to have our daily services. We would have Shacharis, Mitzvah, Marav, our morning, our afternoon, and our evening uh, services. We would continue to keep kosher. We would continue to do our best to be observant of Shabbos. So long as there wasn't some type of direct threat to us as a people to continue to worship in the way that we've been worshiping for over 5,000 years, then there isn't anything that would necessarily contradict what we've been doing. Now, there are other aspects that occur in terms of, let's say, we as a people could get off world and perhaps travel with these people. Do we continue to not to fill in? On a daily basis every morning? What do you do when you're in low Earth orbit and you are literally going around the Earth multiple times a day? How many times do you dive to them? These are questions that really weren't foreseen by ancient or medieval thinkers, and it really would be uh, what what do the Central Council of generally rabbinic leadership feel is best for us? But in reality, no one really knows. So there isn't a perfect answer to it, and humanity, or at least Judaism, would adapt to any kind of event that would occur. But that does not mean that people would not stop being religious immediately. It also doesn't necessarily mean that the religion can't adapt. Even over the course of the last 5,786 years of what is the known Hebraic calendar, we have had to adapt to different events, to different technologies, everything from certainly electronics to the internet, computing, the internet, now AI. How does this affect us as a people? And if eventually there were some kind of event that, hey, um, aliens exist and we're not alone. Okay, well, how does that affect me? Does that mean that I'm going to have dinner with them? Does that mean that it's going to change society? Humanity would adapt. In the same way that Judaism had to adapt to the pandemic, where we weren't allowed to meet in person, we would have virtual services, virtual classes. We would adapt in the exact same way. So if that meant that we weren't available to meet in person for a period of time due to alien disclosure, we would adapt. Judaism is an adaptable religion and will continue to be an adaptable religion even after alien disclosure occurs. Now, when it does occur, does that mean people will be as religious as they once were? I see the religion itself as adapting into a more humanistic framework, especially over the course of the last few centuries. It's not as rigid as it once was. There are rigid aspects of some communities, most certainly, but in general, there's been more flexibility, and I think that flexibility will continue to occur. excellent question. Um, so, in terms of Ezekiel, we're talking specifically about Ezekiel 1. And to give some people just an understanding of what we're referencing, this is a vision. And I think personally that this could have been a vision, though other people interpret Ezekiel's wheel and his vision as a UFO or some type of UAP, which I can't counter that by necessarily saying that's not true. What Ezekiel describes is a storm cloud with fire and lightning and four living creatures. These four faces are human, lion, ox, and eagle. They have wings. There are wheels within wheels. These are known as a fawning, and a brilliant throne-like structure. And then there's a figure described as having an appearance of a human surrounded by radiance. Some modern writers interpret these details as a spacecraft or mechanical wheels, advanced technology, non-human beings. And this interpretation has become popular in many ancient astronaut theories, especially in modern pop culture. Support ancient aliens philosophy or theory, see wheels within wheels. Their direct quote in Ezekiel is their appearance and their work was like unto a wheel within a wheel. And they suggest this is something like rotating machinery, propulsion systems, spacecraft components. The traditional interpretation of wheels are the outline, the heavenly beings representing Hashem or God's omnipresence and movement throughout creation. There is fire and brightness. Ezekiel describes fire moving, glowing metal, flashing lightning. Ancient alien theorists compare this to engines or energy fields, advanced technology. Traditionally, we interpret this as divine revelation, perhaps some type of symbolic descriptions of spiritual reality beyond human comprehension. The idea of the living creatures. Some ancient alien theories interpret these living creatures as extraterrestrial biological beings or non-human intelligences. Traditionally, uh, mysticism interprets them perhaps as the highest order of angels or cosmic forces that sustain creation. In Kabbalah and Merkaba systems, mysticism, generally chariot mysticism, they are not physical creatures but spiritual entities connected to the divine. However, I'm going to look at this from a scientific standpoint as well. If I were an ancient individual and I had this vision, or I even really did see something in reality that I'd never seen before, some type of very advanced technology, I would not know how to describe it. And I would do my best to describe it as realistically as possible, but also I may be influenced with some of the Jewish theology that's going on around the time. And so I'm doing my best to give a real interpretation of what I saw, in addition to that which I know and I have a different standpoint of this. I've simply seen different descriptions and images of what Ezekiel's wheel looks like, and it could very much look like a spacecraft. There's no doubt about that. In reality, I don't know. I don't think anyone necessarily knows, and that's okay. That's okay to admit that we don't know. In fact, it's very brave. It's much braver, in my opinion, to say we don't know than to say absolutely a vision or absolutely it was a real UFO that would have been from a modern speculative perspective. Some people ask if intelligent life exists elsewhere in the universe, could ancient prophets have encountered something beyond their understanding? And maybe this is a version of it. And this may be the best way that a prophet may have been able to interpret something that was off world or extraterrestrial. It could go either way. And uh, the fact that it is such a unique part of the Hebrew Bible, um, and the fact that we don't have a lot of other texts about any kind of ancient alien craft definitely leads people to want to believe. There's the idea I want to believe, and many people want to believe this theory as well. So, from my perspective, it's great to say I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. Both are potential. It could have just been a vision. It could have been a real UFO. Um, a close. I would love there to be. I'd love there to be some kind of secret understanding that this exists, but unfortunately, we don't have that kind of evidence. There is no known point in Jewish history where rabbis thought that there was a galactic federation or had any contact with an interstellar alliance. That idea is more modern, but there are some clues if people want to interpret this way. So traditional Jewish thought often assumes that the universe is filled with many levels of existence. For instance, there are angels, perhaps spiritual messengers or forces. There are the holy living creatures in Ezekiel's vision. There's the Ophanim, heavenly beings associated with the divine chariot, the Sarim, the spiritual princes or governing forces associated with nature realms, and just worlds in general, and different levels of it. So perhaps a medieval rabbi or medieval Kabbalist might say creation is not empty space. It is filled with many forms of intelligence and existence. Now, this council of this galactic federation, some Jewish texts do sometimes describe a heavenly assembly, and if so, people want to reference that within Psalm 82, there's the idea of Hashem, where God stands in the divine assembly, and Job 1, the sons of God or sons of Hashem appear before God or Hashem, and then also in Kings, a vision of heavenly beings surrounding God. So some ancient interpretations imagine perhaps a divine court or heavenly council. And if people want to say this is what the Galactic Federation is and was just referenced in ancient texts in as best a way as possible, then there's a potentiality of that. I would want more information regarding this, but in terms of rabbinic literature and discussions, there isn't a secret group that has some kind of connection with an off-world entity aside from what I just referenced. Well, it is not considered part of direct Jewish identity, so it's not part of Tanakh or the Hebrew Bible, but it did have major influence on Judaism, specifically in the Second Temple period and into the centuries there. So basically, to give people an understanding, this book is originally written in Aramaic with possibly portions of Hebrew influence, and it's later translated into Greek and perhaps Ethiopian. And fragments were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, which really lend, especially in the mid 20th century, much more increased uh, an increased desire in what was actually. The book consists of generally five major sections: is the Book of Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, Dream Visions, and then the Epistle of Enoch. Enoch is within the Hebrew Bible, so it's not to say that he's not a he's seen as the seventh person from Adam, so we have seven generations separated from Adam. And the idea is that there are this idea linked with it, but specifically what you referenced, the watchers. Who are these watchers? They are perhaps angels assigned to watch over humanity, and instead they rebel. They have a leader, Sanjaza, and with other leaders as well. Perhaps about 200 angels descend above Mount Hermon. And this expands on this Genesis 6 or Bereshit 6 idea that the sons of God saw the daughters of men. Enoch expands on this directly and says the angels desire human women, they marry them, and they have children, and their children become giants. And then this discussion of the Nephilim occurs, that their offspring are enormous, that they have characteristics of immense strength, insatiable hunger, violence, destruction, and eventually they consume crops, animals, humans, and chaos spreads. Also, there's the idea of the fallen angel teaches forbidden acts. So, for instance, examples include Azazel, who teaches metallurgy, swords, armor, warfare, cosmetics. Java teaches magic. Others teach writing or astrology, constellations, even poisons. The idea is not that knowledge itself is evil, but that divine knowledge was misused outside of its proper boundaries. So these are some of the takes that occur within the Book of Enoch, and there's a judgment of watchers who plead with Enoch and ask him to intercede. God refuses. Generally, though, the Book of Enoch within mainstream centrist Judaism is seen as perhaps apocryphal, but is not anything that uh, is is studied within our normal Talmud classes, or normal Chumash classes, or Torah or Tanakh classes. These are more, I would say, more people who have a desire from a Kabbalistic standpoint to learn more about what is perhaps going on within Judaism, just the world in general. Now, in terms of the Nephilim, which we referenced, uh, this is mentioned. I'd like to make the connection that the Nephilim are mentioned in Tanakh, which, for those who don't know, this is an acronym of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, translated Torah, prophets, and writings. Basically, the Hebrew Bible that people are maybe familiar with. Now, in terms of the Nephilim, the root is Nephal, which means to fall, and the possible translations are fallen ones, those who have fallen, those who cause others to fall, violent ones, or even giants. So there's that idea as well. Now, we have the idea, perhaps, uh, how many times do they occur? For those who aren't familiar with the Hebrew Bible, are they all over the place, or is it like packaged twice? The first in Bereshit or Genesis, and specifically the translation is the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men of old, men of renown. And that's the first time that we see this. This is the first biblical appearance of the Nephilim. It appears immediately before the flood narrative. It does not explicitly define who the Nephilim are. The interpretation depends heavily on surrounding verses. And then the second occurrence occurs in Numbers, which is the book of, in the Hebrew Bible, Midbar, which means in the wilderness. The translation is that, and there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, from the Nephilim, and we were in our own sight like grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. Now, this is the second and final appearance that we find. It was spoken by the Israelites. There is a chronological tension within Bereshit or Genesis, and it's often interpreted as exaggeration and comparison. Now, the question emerges, how did the Nephilim exist after the flood? Because within Genesis, there's the idea that places them before the flood, and Numbers references them after the flood, and the text does not resolve this issue. The classical explanations of this are that the spies used legendary language to describe fear. There's a comparison theory that the Anakim were compared to legendary Nephilim, and there's a descendant theory. Later groups preserved the name for reputation. In the rabbinic approach, the sons of God could be rulers or nobles, and Nephilim were the violent human elites. So they were not extraterrestrial from a traditional rabbinic approach. This preserves strict monotheism and avoids angelic reproduction, and it focuses on human moral comparison. Now, there's the Second Temple tradition, which some ancient writings interpret sons of God as angels or Nephilim as giant offspring. This is found in Enochic literature, which we reference, and it's influential, but it's not universal within Judaism. And then moving into the book of Enoch, more previously stated, it is in place. It was preserved among Dead Sea Scrolls, and it introduces this Watcher's narrative. What we really find is that the from an academic view, there's might be some preservation of older mystic traditions in here. There are possibly legendary heroic figures. There are parallels that exist in Near Eastern literature, and Genesis preserves only fragments. There are other discussions that occur that many times people connect the Anunnaki. This is discussed as a divine council figure. It's not identical to the Nephilim. This is a more Mesopotamian idea and is not referenced within the Hebrew Bible. Also, within Greek stories or Greek tradition, demigods, divine human offspring things, no direct link necessarily to the faith. From a rabbinic Judaism standpoint, we emphasize that if humans were of moral corruption, human responsibility, and divine judgment. There are some theories in the modern age that propose these were advanced beings of extraterrestrial origin or concepts, but these are not found in ancient Hebrew texts. So, kind of to summarize, they're mentioned twice, at least within the Hebrew Bible. Perhaps as references to giants. Some traditions say that it's the angels, and then they have much more of a role, perhaps, within the book of. It's an excellent question. And there are parallels there. Excellent. Well, before we do so, may I please just kind of tie up the Jaime Shed development that happened last month with an interview that we had? Yes, thank you. And also to the point that you made, I'd love to meet with you again in the future, perhaps multiple times or a series if need be. And I'd love to have these types of conversations with you. So, with that being said, I am very excited for that opportunity. Uh, in terms of ownership and what happened with him after December 2020, it's an excellent question that many people had. I had. What happened to this old man who made all of these claims that he just disappeared? And if so, why did he disappear? So, in answer to that, yes, it disappeared. After November 2020, we didn't hear anything about him really until June of 2026, which is just serendipitous that we had this event happen just last month. And additionally, we're celebrating the 79th anniversary of Roswell this month, which is serendipitous as well. And specifically, this event happened on June 10th, 2026. I met with Uri Geller. For those who don't know, Uri Geller is also in and don't speak through or don't have a translation, this interview is in English, which is helpful. And Geller opens by acknowledging that they've had thousands of inquiries regarding Shed's multi-year silence following his controversial 2020 revelations. And I got to say, what I had suspected happened, there was a Men in Black encounter. As Shed attributes his withdrawal to a visit from mysterious, untraceable figures at his apartment. These individuals demonstrated intimate, personal knowledge of his life and questioned him on sensitive topics, including nuclear physics. As Shed chose to cease public discourse on the subject following this encounter until he consulted with others, including him, which is absolutely fascinating. That perhaps he was threatened, perhaps he just felt more comfortable staying quiet. But then there's an interesting aspect now. At 87, he went quiet, and now at 93, he feels comfortable to come back and talk about it. That's one of the things that I find very interesting with his with Uri Geller is that he doesn't take any uh, step back on what he stated. He still believes that there's a galactic federation. He doubles down on it, which I find to be of extreme interest in him, because he could have very easily said, "Oh, my words were being misinterpreted," or that this all got out of control, or that there were mistranslations of my book or of my interview. That's not what I meant. But he doesn't do that at all. He doubles down on it and says that he was potentially threatened. And with that, perhaps the next time we meet, there will be other developments. He is 93 years old, so perhaps he is moving towards the latter stages of his life. But from the interview that he does, he still seems his sound mind and speaks very good English as well. So for anyone who wants to see that directly, I recommend looking up Uri Geller and Time a Shed's interview. With that being said, yes, I do stream my life 24/7, 365, for world. And I'm really excited to be able to talk about what I do and why I do. This is essentially a Truman Show or a Big Brother. It's a timeline and a time capsule of human achievement and human existence. I started this during the pandemic when my role, in addition to being a rabbi, I'm a certified project management professional. I'm an app developer. I successfully launched apps on the App Store, Google Play, and been a Scrum Master, work with development teams and software. And my position went from going into work every day in a suit and tie to be remote. And so I went from someone who was going to synagogue 3 times a day and black hat, black suit, all of that, to now living this digital world or and having some type of social media footprint. And my days went from being on camera from 0 hours a day to anywhere between 8 hours for work and 2 or 3 or 4 for different services that I went and classes that I was taking. And eventually became, I would say, much more comfortable on camera than I was previously. And my anxiety of being on camera so much was really lessened, that I've had the opportunity to basically have more than half of my day already on camera. And I felt like I'm not doing anything that's so secretive, and why not just give people access to the other part of my day? And I had the Truman Show and the television show Big Brother, and I thought, you know what, this was always something that had been hypothesized that something like this may occur. What if I do it, but instead of it being against my consent or with no consent in the case of Truman Burbank and the Truman Show, I give my consent, and what would happen with that? Alongside my knowledge of software and just information technology, I had learned that data in 2017 had overtaken petroleum as Earth's #1 resource, according to The Economist, which always stuck out in my mind that it could have a major impact on society. And this could potentially be a really great opportunity to get myself a platform, to be able to promote positivity, to be able to promote world peace, to be able to promote ending world hunger through the use of technology, such as agricultural drones, floating greenhouses, saltwater greenhouses, hydroponics, vertical farming, cloud seeding. These are all things that I'd like to see over the course of the next generation or two, and certainly into the coming centuries, to be able to eradicate world hunger, to be able to eradicate wilderness using technologies like the digging of wells or the kind of process known as desalination technology. And I thought, you know what, if I am already so comfortable being on camera, why not only stream what I do, but archive it for people in the future? I started streaming in fall of 2021. Though before then, I was archiving my life on just aspects of my life specifically. This all started, I wanted to see what my golf swing looked like. And so I'd make little jokes to myself, and I'd upload those videos to the cloud, not public by any means, for my potential future family, God willing, one day to be able to see what the dear old them was like before he had met their mother, before they were even a gleam in my eye, and to see a little aspect of what life was like during the pandemic. And that was taking me a long time, just from downloading the information, re-uploading the information. I thought there's got to be a better way, and there is. It's streaming. So in fall of 2021, I created my first YouTube account, my first Twitch account, and many of the other social media platforms. I very quickly recognized that if I want to do this 24-hour day undertaking, I need to do it on more than just one device. I need to have redundant streams. I need to have backups because app crashes happen, disconnects happen, and all of the other technological issues that occur. So what I ended up doing was buying over 33 different devices, everything from laptops to Chromebooks to tablets, iPhones, Android devices, you name it, and giving myself the opportunity to put cameras all around myself, which I think is a really interesting. And I'll show people when they want to view what my life is like. You can literally go back for the last more than 4 years, nearly 5 years, and watch most every second of every moment of my life. And the way that you can do this is by typing into YouTube rep and filtering by live. And for anyone who has the opportunity to do that, what you will see is more data than you've ever seen with any individual ever. So what we have here, you type Rabbi Rothschild, and the key is we want to filter by live. And when we do that, you're going to see more cameras than you've ever seen on an individual ever from all different angles. We have side angles, we have ceiling cameras, we have uh, certainly straight on cameras. Whatever you want to view or however you want to view me, you have the opportunity. And this, I think, is a really interesting opportunity, perhaps for AI to be able to study humanity from multiple angles. And I recognize that I was doing this project over a year before large language models became even known in mainstream society. I was an early adopter of ChatGPT in November of 2022 and a user in November 30th, 2022 when it launched. So I've been able to see the birth or in its own way, the birth of AI from a public standpoint that's really taken over our daily lives. I've been able to see the launches of certainly Gemini and Claude and Perplexity and uh, Grok, you name it, and how they've improved. I've been able to see the transition of when you were able to very easily jailbreak GPT to now that it's much more closed off system. We've been able to tell the story, not just of my life, but also the birth of AI, which I think is really interesting. Moreover, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, I keep a radio on in the background. So you literally can go back to any moment of my life over the course of the last more than 4 years, almost 5 years, and know what was going on in world history. I feel this is going to be very interesting for the people of the future to be able to study from a timeline or time capsule type of a medium. It's essentially in a previous generation, I would have been a journalist, someone who writes in a journal, or a diarist, someone who writes in a diary. But I just use video as a way to capture this information. We've seen the death of the queen, the birth of AI, the coronation of a king, and everything in between. We've seen Olympic Games and World Cups and every kind of sporting event. We've watched most every kind of movie and film and documentary out there. Listened to every major album of every major artist. This is really a compendium of human existence. And not only am I telling the story of my life, not only are we telling both history, but it's an opportunity for AI to be able to learn about human behavior, to be able to learn about eating habits, sleeping habits, certainly circadian rhythms, the human psyche. I think it's pretty interesting as well that we'll be able to study micro behaviors, especially because I have so many different angles many different angles to be able to study humanity. And I think another really interesting aspect of this is that which we can't even predict yet. Once, once the ability for AI to be able to timestamp every single video that I have and to put it in all the major languages that we have, what can we learn from this? And perhaps we'll be able to zoom in. We'll be able to enhance the quality. We'll be able to enhance the sound. Everything will be translated. It's essentially a modern day uh, people. It's been described. I'm not comparing, but in its own way that the Bible tells the story of the Jewish people, this stream tells the story of my life within Judaism. And I do my best to be as open to people. So for anyone out there who is like, well, I can watch your life and that's cool, but I want to communicate with you. You can do so 24 hours a day in my Discord, which is discord.me/rabbi. I have people who live alongside me who have been inspired by this journey that we're on, who now stream their own lives in there. So I'm not alone in this endeavor. I've been going for more than 1,700 days. This is a huge amount of data that will eventually be discovered by the masses. I will go viral. And when I do, I want to give back to all the people who have helped me along the way. I want to push for disclosure. I talk about futurism in ways that many people haven't heard before. Things like anti-gravity, antimatter, fast-to-light travel, fast-to-light communication. Certainly things like terraforming of other planets, space elevators, space tourism, a Bering Strait tunnel, clearing of the Darien Gap, a Gibraltar Bridge, perhaps, the idea of a transatlantic tunnel, connecting people, universal translators, artificial general intelligence, artificial narrow intelligence, artificial general intelligence, artificial superintelligence, teleportation, telekinesis, telepathy. I talk about things like Santa Claus machines, which are big replicators. Think of a 3D printer that's not just connected to plastic, but all of the different elements in the periodic table that can make whatever you want. I talk about things like de-extinction. Many people don't know this, but the first successful de-extinction took place in the year 2003 with the Pioneer Ibex, which is a boat located in northern Spain, southern France. Fast forward to the year 2021, a company out of Dallas, Texas, is founded known as Colossal Bioscientific. They made recent headlines with their direwolf hybrids. Following that project, they want to uh, really reintroduce the um, the woolly mammoth into the Arctic Circle within the next 2 years. Which, well, to me, I don't know why people aren't talking about such a scientific innovation. They want to do this using Asian elephant circuits. Following the reintroduction of the woolly mammoth in the Arctic Circle, they want to reintroduce the Tasmanian tiger, followed by the dodo bird. These are fascinating topics that you're not going to hear everywhere else. Moreover, I talk about life extension technology. When we were born, the average life expectancy for you and most of the audience was probably about 8 years old. But we're moving into a new generation where we may be living to 120, perhaps longer, perhaps even reverse age, utilize types of technologies like oxygen therapy, human growth hormone, stem cells, cryonics, cryogenics, peptides, nootropics, cold shock therapy, testosterone replacement therapy, you name it, we're going to be living longer. At least people on Earth are going to be living longer. We have the discussion of certainly transhumanism and perhaps revivification technology, and moving into the idea of mind uploading technology, where with someone's consent, and I say this is all with someone's consent, but if they want, you may in the future be able to scan your brain into a computer like a CAT scan or an MRI, where every atom is in your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system for later download. As an android, an avatar, a cyborg, a cybernetic being, a clone of yourself, a robot, an ethereal being, whatever you want to be. But essentially, what I'm saying to you and saying to the audience is that we are in the precipice of something major. That's the idea of a digital immortality. These are just some of the topics that we talk about in addition to the push for alien disclosure and the galactic federation and all of the things that we covered. I find this to be a fascinating project that to which I've dedicated my life. And it's just a matter of time. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I've streamed as far north as Santa Barbara, as far south as San Diego, as far east as the desert and mountains, as far west as the Pacific Ocean. I've streamed in Beverly Hills, in Los Angeles, in Disney, really everywhere in Southern California. And I'd like to take this project to the world. I'd like to give people eventually a first-person view of what a human life is like for as long as I can live. And I think people will be able to study this, learn more that we have much more that unifies us than that which divides us, that we may not be alone in the cosmos to try to answer the big questions that exist. And my life is a dedication to that. So if anybody's looking, how can you find me? As I showed previously, Rabbi Rothschild in YouTube filtered by life. You'll see more content there than you've ever seen of any creator ever. I can say that bar none. Moreover, I have more social media than any person ever. I have over 100 YouTube accounts, over 200 Instagram accounts, over 500 Twitch accounts, over 1,000 TikTok accounts, over 2,000 Twitter accounts, over 5,000 Blue Sky accounts, over 10,000 accounts, and more social media than any person ever. This is going to be a treasure trove for the future of humanity to be able to study. Moreover, I write regularly, so you can find my writings at rabbirothschild.medium.com. I don't just write on religious topics, I write on certainly justice topics, social justice, technological topics, whatever it is that I find of interest and other people find of interest, I'm writing about it. So I'm always creating content, and it's just a matter of time until enough people hear about what I do and this project. It's going to go viral in its own way. It may be one of the biggest events in global history. And when that occurs, God will push the disclosure aspect of it as well. So with that, I want to thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. And we will consider this part one of perhaps future parts in the future where we will connect and talk about all of those things that you referenced earlier. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thank you. And I'm going to thank your audience. Excellent. Do you mind if I send you my relevant websites that you could put in the description for since you appreciate that? Absolutely. And we'll let a little bit of time go and then we'll reconnect and schedule something else. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for the opportunity. You were a wonderful interviewer. Take care. Absolutely. How did it go? I don't know. Really? Yes. What'd you think of him? He's a really nice person. Very smart. Very smart. Impressively smart. So, yes, very, very impressive individual. You have to. Absolutely. I think it could have been much more challenging. He could have he slipped one of his wrestles, which I thought was pretty good. And for anybody, sorry, to yourself afterward? Oh, well, you can get good. You hear anybody watching. But I do agree with myself in this thing because I feel it's important to be able uh, to, to learn. What would I have? There's always something you could always learn. So what would it be? You I probably would have said a little bit more, but it's not like I didn't know what I was options. Oh, that's good. But it's just a big, large amount of information to learn. Are you happy with it? Could it have gone better? Um, I don't know what it was, but there was more parts I couldn't really say what it was. Just that a written part now, no matter what, probably. So I've got to say, I feel great. Interesting. He knows the topic as well that we were referencing. And is there anything you would talk about more? How about that? You might ask, what did you know about myself? Into that. So it was cool. It was cool that he let me show my tweet and all my different streams. Are you happy? Yeah, dog. Um, I got 200 tomorrow. I lack the confidence that I should have in them. But in two topics, one I should be fine. It's whether I think I'm special enough features. The other one is on Friday. Because I don't know. That's such a big topic. Some people I'm like, yeah, actually about these climate topics that are like that's a difficult one. And I feel I kind of almost blew it because he's like I was like, so what is this about? Yeah, it's over. Okay. Well, you were never someone who I ever thought you'd be on the podcast that way. But you listen to podcasts almost exclusively. If you don't watch TV, what's the last TV clip? I mean, maybe like on TV doesn't happen. Why? Um, it had me how if you think he's a nice person, you could interview on that. Like, you happy and what oh, I know what I mentioned. I didn't mention my mention. That is something that's this is first. Well, actually, I know there is one time we had a papers on your desk. So, and I think basically surrounded by and and next door to them, every two age. I always have something. I can remember I still those girls came up to my house and rang the doorbell. They were that's the boys were coming to school from Kentucky, like, and every time I was just, but I just remember how much courage it took you to get to and the years and two girls who were really good. I don't know her name, never knew. Just remember they were so nice. I was thinking like, I'm getting a little, but I think my parents what my mind was going to. I just remember, I, they just, I was always, they were having a shit. I was, Really? Why, why aren't you? Well, they, I think, were from the second. We were really, but I don't remember seeing your mom. I'm sure it's my mom, but she can stand up and I'm gonna my friends. Whoa, two people that are super high. All the boys are like, you're a girl. What would they do? I don't remember that getting really close to the girl. Sure. Which one? Hey, let's go. Maybe at the same time. She had a sister. They were both. When I, it's, they probably not you see some beautiful existence. I'll never forget the flat hat and one of those like, that they put out. They just seem like they're everything that's different. I'm sure. I don't know even though who live. Like, down. I think about it. They're always doing stuff. Right? And we're gonna hook up if we make out. You wave to me, you know, girl, hopscotch, headshot, and remember the girl who played basketball and be like, I'm playing basketball, why can't I remember even like you didn't play basketball and then like, all the there. So why? I really don't know hooking up with her. Hard thing. What happened? They were so nice. I just remember picking them. Do you guys know that I'm not allowed to hate you for still being so you well, really? I mean, although, I kind of remember like I haven't seen like, but I'm sure. Yeah, there were two girls. There were two houses. They were like four girls. All of them. I remember this girl. She was a single mom. She was. Uh, I never. This girl name. Where like that like her house. I don't know. They were just hanging out there. You know what it is. I put on this. That I had this. I was bed. I So there's what is good. And it feels like that with it. Never like what is going on. It's just so, like, and I to this day have no idea what she looks like. But it's like an home improvement. But, and then the people next door, people, knows me. So I would she was the doctor. And next year, and help out. What is the I actually have I want to say I was there like the first I was there, and but maybe she. I want to say she. I want to say she would have been but maybe she was just run. But I think about the cloud. Think about the, I think about them. Well, they were always different, and I, I hope you go. Why are you sure? Or anything? I just think that the way that they want to play with them. What was the I don't want to say wrong. It was just like the one time I had ever since. What do you think about it? They have they just seem like did you ever consider that? How do you consider beauty for
guys ready to start tonight's fucking show? Well. Thank God, I might be one of the best fucking comedy makers on planet Earth. My small talent, I attack. It's always been that way. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present you two of the best goddamn comedians on planet Earth and two of our favorite guests in the history of the show. Two of my closest friends. Make some noise for Dan Soder. New York. On 9/11, they were saving people, pulling them from the buildings. Oh, how about a lovely comedy, everybody? I mean, holy shit. Right when the sausage just got a little too sausagey, here she is to add a little feminine energy, some good mojo, for everybody. She A.H.G. It's the worst Instagram handle of all time. Completely on. Worst marketing of all time for a hot chick. Gina is not even her name. Her name is Heidi, and her Instagram is Gina with her is not HG. That makes no sense. We call Gina all night.
It's also a Instagram handle's like a tough Wi-Fi password.
No, it really is. Absolutely ridiculous. We're happy to have you guys. Welcome. We have one more special treat, ladies and gentlemen. One of the greatest band members in the history of the show is here joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, you know her, you love her. This is the great Steve Johnson. Oh, shit. He's hilarious. And she also plays the horn. She has a life and is absolutely phenomenally hilarious. And when she is, she's funny afterwards, everybody goes, you guys can do it. You louder than the tree. There you go.
I like that.
Yeah, it's fun. You'll see it's in action. She's a fucking little sniper.
Y'all personalities.
And it's big, motherfuckers. Other than that, you guys know how over 200 souls signed up for the opportunity to perhaps 60 seconds on this stage. Well, that's so haggard fucking good purpose. And while we wrangle the first comedian, and as you know, the 60 seconds, you know, their time is up and you're listening to the kid. Hollywood there. And we talk to them about anything that may happen in their lives, what makes them interesting, or what might be funnier for them to talk about. A couple things improvised. Anything can happen. Are you guys ready to start tonight's fucking show? While we grab the our fucking balls, we have a regular on this show. He has been starting every episode. He's an absolute fucking sensation. He's a local icon, a comics comic, and also a fans comic. Absolute freak nature, a bundle of energy, power source. He literally is like a solar panel. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the great hour of 60 seconds uninterrupted. Casey Rocket! I'm pregnant. Cool. Yeah. Nights like this, I wish it was still covered in mud from the predator. You know what I mean? So when you get close, sort of see the kids. I gotta get out here. I got a date tonight. Yeah, her name, hot single. What's your location? Casual and strings attached. And she was really positive. Is he gonna try to steal my wallet later? Is it a decoy wallet? Yeah. I'll take it. I'll take it. Absolutely. Force of thinking nature. And again, you boys have to be here. He's also running for mayor. Pleasures all mine, Tony. Happy to be here in the 21st District of Austin today. Absolutely relaxed. In the moment, wild, great Jack the Ripper. Some people call him. You have a lot of these nicknames. Cal Ripken Jr., Ricky Longstockings, the boy who riffed, the Brown Band. Riffy Jr. Riffy Jr. Yeah. Riff Raff. Yeah. Yes. Riff. It's what's for dinner. Drugs for different folks. Yeah. Yeah. Man, I got excited on that one. So what's been on the kids here? Been good. I was in Chicago Thursday, Wisconsin Friday, Rally. Yesterday, been going around, been going good. So I've been doing that. Philly tomorrow. Oh, yeah. Big class. Wow. Around Lee yesterday. Rally wasn't. You took That's so true. So true. The interesting thing about Casey